More than half of Canadians report being bullied or know a coworker who experienced it on the job. But the survey finds only a third of workplaces take steps to bring an end to the bullying. To discuss the costs of bullying at work, we are joined by Alex Lucifero to chat more about this. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Okay, so Alex, we hear of bullying at school. We hear of it online. We don't often talk about it in the workplace, though. So what does it look like at the office?
Sure, and it's certainly sad to say, Trish, but you know, those numbers that were bandied about in that report are not surprising to either myself as an employment lawyer or to HR professionals in the workplace. We see these kinds of bullying and harassment situations all day, every day. What does bullying or harassment look like in the workplace? It's actually quite simple. Harassment would be considered any kind of offensive, intimidating, or malicious behavior that affects a worker, of course, and that the person doing the harassing or doing the intimidating should know or ought to know that is causing harm to the other coworker. So that's harassment. Bullying might be slightly different. Bullying is usually described as intimidation, striking fear, or causing distress in another employee or in a coworker for the purposes of asserting control or asserting power over that employee. So they're effectively both sides of the same coin, but there are slightly different definitions, at least under the law.
Okay, so sometimes it can maybe be a little bit difficult to make that distinction then as the employee who might be the target of harassment or bullying.
Sure, because oftentimes they go together.
Yeah.
Those kinds of behaviors are combined into a workplace. And you know, as I said, we see this all the time. We speak to people every day that go through these kinds of situations. And you know, the message to employees out there is that you do have options in those situations. You should not be subject to that kind of behavior. There are protections for employees out there. And also for employers on the other side of the spectrum, they have an obligation to maintain a workplace that's free from that kind of behavior, and also it's in their best interest to maintain a positive work environment.
Yes, and I mean, we've certainly seen employers kind of looking again at those harassment policies in light of the Me Too movement, right? And so it's something that they constantly have to be aware of. For employees who feel like they are being bullied at the office, what should they do? Should they confront the bully or take it straight to management?
I would not advise an employee to confront the bully. Usually that's a difficult situation to manage and usually makes things more complicated. You have every right to go to your employer. And if you're dealing with a manager, for example, who's bullying, go above that manager. Go to the owner of the company or to the HR manager if there's an HR department. Employers have a right, have an obligation, rather, to investigate incidents of harassment. They should have harassment policies. Those are requirements under the law. So an employer has to take action in those kinds of situations. They have no choice but to take action, and that's step number one for an employee. Tell your employer. If your employer investigates, hopefully they resolve the matter. If they do not investigate,
that's the key.
Which is a concern, and the report that we saw shows that a lot of employers do not investigate, which is a huge problem for employers. Again, it's a requirement under the law. If your employer does not investigate an incident of harassment or bullying, you have to seek outside advice and counsel, and that's when I would advise employees to seek employment advice. Sometimes we advise employees to contact the Ministry of Labor. There are certain things that the Ministry of Labor can do in these kinds of situations as far as investigations go. But certainly if your employer isn't doing anything in that situation, you need to escalate the matter to the next level of seriousness, let's say. Okay,
some good advice for an issue that clearly is impacting a lot of Canadians and that a lot of people maybe don't quite know how to handle it. So we appreciate your time this morning. Thank you so much. Trish.